The House of Representatives in Washington has the power of the purse strings. That's what the founders had in mind, and we need to get back to that. And our federal government, they waste money on the craziest, stupidest programs in the world. Joe Biden's recent budget for this year, $7.3 trillion. That's all fine and good, except we only bring in $5 trillion. Now, you don't have to be a math major or a finance guy like me to say, wait a minute, we're going to spend $7.3 trillion when we only bring in five? What kind of a prudent individual would make a decision like that? Well, they're not prudent in Washington, so we got to get them out of there and start over.
Welcome to the Local Yokel Idaho podcast. My name is Tyler, and we have another wonderful interview today with Scott Cleveland. He is running for the 2nd Congressional District U.S. House Representative against Mike Simpson. He is the 3rd Vice Chairman of the Ada County Republican Central Committee. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Cleveland.
Hey, it's great to be on with you, Tyler. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, I've seen your different op-eds that you've had there on Idaho Dispatch, talking about stuff related to the dams. And then I've also seen you speak at Lincoln Day and a couple other events. So it's really cool to be able to sit down and record with you.
Yeah, we've been spending a lot of road time. I think I put 10,000 miles on the new campaign bus already since January. Got a couple thousand more to go and a couple weeks to go, but that's fine. I'm not complaining. I signed up for it.
Right. Well, I know one place doing research for this show and stuff is that you're originally from New Mexico, right?
That is correct. The failed state of New Mexico, which has become a crime-ridden cesspool, much like a third world country, sad to say, but it's true.
Yeah, I myself have not visited. I know I very much enjoy my home state here, but I do know my co-host that I regularly record with, he's from New Mexico, and independent of the politics, he'll regularly rave about the delicious food that's usually given there.
Yes, that's correct. They do have the best Mexican food in the world there, New Mexican food. My family is all still down there, and we, of course, go home to visit occasionally. But whenever I go, I take a gun just pretty much everywhere that I go. New Mexico has the worst crime in the country out of all 50 states. New Mexico is number 1 in crime stats.
Interesting. Well, I mean, bringing that kind of a little bit more to home, what brought you from New Mexico to Idaho? What's kind of the story of you coming to the state?
Well, Kathy and I moved here in 2006, so it's almost like the pioneer days, if you think of all the newcomers since then.
Right.
This is now our permanent home. We live in Garden City. We call it the GC. It sounds better when you call it the GC, right? We love it here. And, I have an investment advisory business. I've been an investment advisor for 35 years now.
Very nice.
So I know a little bit about money. I know a little bit about taxes. I know a little bit about how the government and bureaucracies work.
Right.
I enjoy being a small business owner, and that's a blessing because it's given me the freedom and the flexibility to go out and campaign, which we've been doing hard since January.
Right. Yeah. I know you guys were on it pretty early on, that there were some races that were kind of getting going, but you guys were kind of right on the scene out of the gate there.
Well, I wasn't planning on running against Mike Simpson right away until I talked to all my contacts in eastern Idaho, and anybody that had a viable chance at defeating Mike Simpson, none of them wanted to step up into the race. They were doing other things, maybe running for the state legislature or working on some other projects. And I went to the GOP convention in Meridian in January and said to all my friends, okay, last call, because if you're not going to jump in and challenge Mike Simpson, I'm about to, but we don't want to have a crowded field. And everybody said, nope, I'm out. And so that's the good news. It's really a contest between the incumbent and myself. There's one other third, guy
right
on the ballot, but he's kind of a no-name guy that doesn't really have much of a campaign or any real threat to taking a lot of votes or anything. So I feel like my chances are pretty good against Mike Simpson. In the primary just under 2 years ago, Mike Simpson only scored 54% of the statewide GOP total. So that is not a guy that's invincible this time around. I would also argue that he's less popular today than he was 2 years ago. So I like my chances.
I mean, in all fairness, there again, like I kind of teased there in the trailer, I have not seen a Mike Simpson sign yet, if I'm being honest, traveling around the state. I was over in eastern Idaho quite a bit this last weekend, just enjoying the beauty over there. And it's more common to see a Scott Cleveland sign. So I think you have a very good chance to achieve your race there. And I mean, kind of coming into the body of the interview and the backgrounds, like I mentioned
Mhm.
earlier, you're going for the congressional seat and you were the third vice chair over there in the Republican Party. For those that are completely new to politics,
Mhm.
part of their show and audience usually is people that's trying to learn or new to it. What is the Republican Central Committee? What was the role that you kind of had there? What
Okay.
did that all involve?
Well, each political party, the GOP in this example, is a private organization. They're not part of the state. They're not part of, the federal government or anything like that. It is a private organization. And uh, Idaho has 44 counties. So there's a GOP delegate, a GOP body. These are elected people that run first off to be what's known as a precinct committee man or woman. For example, Ada County being Idaho's largest by far, there's 197 precinct men and women committee people, and those are elected officials. In fact, those people are all running for either their first election or reelection on the same ballot that we'll be voting on here in a couple of weeks. So, but it's by precinct. And so you may have two or three names on there to choose from. And those people represent the body. And then, of course, the body elects its officers for each county. And then the larger size of that is the districts. And then ultimately, you have the state GOP chairwoman, which is currently Dorothy Moon, that kind of oversees the whole operation. So they have monthly meetings. They have two semi-annual meetings. The annual meeting is coming up in June, this time up in Coeur d'Alene, so about a 7-hour drive. And there'll be probably, I don't know, 500 delegates, 600 delegates from around the state, all of these counties. And they pass rules and resolutions. They discuss the GOP platform. And of course, they elect their officers. And these people, whether they're precinct committee people or some sort of a district chairman, they serve in those roles for 2 full years, and they cannot be kicked out for any reason. You have to wait until 2 years later if you don't like their performance to vote them out. So it's an interesting process and dynamic. I was elected the third vice chairman of the Ada County GOP last fall when a bunch of the officers, you probably heard that story, a bunch of the officers quit, and that's when I was elected. An interesting thing about Ada County is I was also endorsed formally by the Ada County GOP over our sitting incumbent, Mike Simpson. That's a big deal.
Oh,
I
yes.
have the second largest county. If you were over in eastern Idaho, you were probably in Bonneville County, Idaho Falls. I was endorsed formally by that county, and that's the second largest voting block. And I have three others, Elmore, Custer, and Oneida, that have formally endorsed me. Not all county committees do endorse candidates, but
Right.
a handful of them have, and none of them have endorsed Mike Simpson.
Yeah, he doesn't seem to be very popular, especially after the House Speaker situation that happened. But
Right?
with that, so you had a little bit of a background, right, doing politics and stuff within the Republican
Mm-hmm.
Party. You didn't just try to immediately jump right from nothing to something. What were your specific tenets for running to the race, independent of other people not coming up to bat?
Well, some of your listeners may recognize my name because I ran 2 years ago as an independent, even though, for the record, I'm a lifelong Republican. But 2 years ago, I ran as an independent candidate against U.S. Senator Mike Crapo. And while I came up short in that race, two very important things did come from it, Tyler. Number one, I got valuable contacts in all 44 counties in the state, which has proven very helpful this time around. But more importantly, I gathered very valuable experience on how to run a large scale campaign. It's just got 1,000 moving parts to it. This time, instead of campaigning in 44 counties, I'm only campaigning in 25 and a half counties. So it's a little bit more manageable. But as you can imagine, the amount of work and planning and resources that goes into this and the structure that's necessary, it's actually quite interesting, that part of the process. But my last campaign did not leave a bad taste in my mouth. I felt like, at the time, our country is not being led by people that are competent. But the people that are running our country right now are doing a piss poor job of it. And that was my short answer to when somebody asked me, well, why are you running for office? I said, the people that are doing it now, they suck at it. We deserve better than what we're getting. And Mike Simpson is just he's a symptom of that broken system, if you will.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. There does seem to be a disconnect. People not really, I don't know, having values or understanding who they're really representing. And that kind of segues into the kind of the other situation that I think sometimes happens, especially in our country, is a loss of morals or standards that we kind of stand on and we hold to. For you, what are your principles? Are they defined from something like a faith, like some religion that you have that bases that off of, or are they more personal ones?
Well, that's a great question as well. So I model all of my political leanings very simply off of the following three or four items. Number one, the United States Constitution. Our Constitution is not broken. It's a powerful document, the best document that's ever been created to govern a citizenry. And I'm very strict about is something constitutional or not, and why is the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, which is a part of it, that's
Right.
number two. Uh, I'm asked this question a lot: what is the proper role of government? And the answer is the proper role of government is to protect the rights, freedoms, and liberties of the citizens of the United States. Hard stop. It's not there to micromanage us and tell us what kind of light bulbs we can buy. It's not to tell us what kind of mask we have to wear or force a vaccine mandate, government lockdowns. The Constitution doesn't need to be reworked or rewritten. The Bill of Rights is not defective. And those are very important documents. I'll add another one, though, the Ten Commandments. I am a Christian, and I believe in the Ten Commandments. And I'll throw in my fourth one just to make it a little more interesting, the Golden Rule. If we treated everybody in this country the way we wanted to be treated, we'd have a lot less rioting going on these days. But the politicians don't care about much of any of that because many of the poor decisions that they make does not impact them directly. It does impact the rest of us, and we need to get back to making better decisions in Washington, D.C. I have nothing personal against Mike Simpson, but some of his policy positions have been and will continue to be disastrous for Idahoans if he's reelected.
Continuing on that thread there, so you have the faith, you've got the U.S. Constitution, which I will agree was very well written, and I think there was a lot of wisdom. But with that said,
Right.
there definitely is this balancing act that has to occur, and we've seen it teeter back and forth. What would you say is the balance between the role of what the church and what the civil sphere should be? Is there any overlap, or is it a hard cut line between those two?
Well, I don't see it as a hard cut line. I mean, this is a nation that was founded on Christianity and religious freedom. Our forefathers fled England in wooden boats across the Atlantic Ocean, no small risk, by the way, to come here to pursue religious freedom. So I have a hard time when people want to completely strip out the idea of religion from the founding documents. I understand the technical aspect of separation of church and state, but we're founded as a Christian nation. I think that as far as where we are today, though, Tyler, we've gotten away from the idea that the states created the federal government and not the other way around. And what has happened is over the many decades, the federal government has become this behemoth, this out of control entity through their bureaucracies and federal agencies, three-letter agencies, executive orders, and the states are no longer in control of their own destiny. And I think we need to go back, get the pendulum swinging back the other way, where states have more sovereignty and the federal government is working on behalf of the citizens of the states instead of the other way around, which is where we are today. I think that's a big part of what we need to fix in Washington.
Yeah, bringing it, would you say, back to more of a local center where you have more local involvement towards the federal level?
Yes, I mean, Idaho is a prime example of it. That the federal government controls 62% of the land mass in the state of Idaho, and instead of using our God-given natural resources, timber, water, minerals, instead of using those to benefit the citizens of Idaho, they either mismanage those resources or they send the money to the U.S. Treasury, and then the U.S. Treasury launders the money through places like Ukraine. Instead of helping Americans at home here, like our homeless veterans, poor people, the elderly, whoever needs real help, honest help. We're sending our tax dollars to foreign governments to fight wars halfway across the globe. It's really reached the level of insanity and stupidity, and that's part of my reason for the run is to take just common sense control back over the purse. The House of Representatives in Washington has the power of the purse strings. That's what the founders had in mind, and we need to get back to that and quit wasting money. There's a difference between spending money and wasting money.
Right. Well, of course, from your background with your different investing companies where you have a wise investment, it's one thing to spend money and know you're going to get a return. It's another thing when you're just spending money for either optics or for some other reason that really doesn't have a return.
I look at taxpayer dollars, not as federal government money. I look at those dollars much like you would if you were a pastor at a church and the membership, your congregation had tithe $100,000. Those are sacred dollars, and they should be treated as sacred dollars and not wasted, not pilfered, not squandered, not misdirected. And our federal government does anything but that. They waste money on the craziest, stupidest programs in the world, and we don't have a revenue problem. We have an aim problem. They're aiming our money at the wrong places, and they're aiming too much of it. Joe Biden's recent budget for this year, if you can believe this, which I do, $7.3 trillion. Well, that's all fine and good, except we only bring in $5 trillion. Now, you don't have to be a math major or a finance guy like me to say, wait a minute, we're going to spend 7.3 trillion when we only bring in 5? What kind of a prudent individual would make a decision like that? Well, they're not prudent in Washington, so we got to get them out of there and start over.
Right. And on that, the principles and the morality we work from really doesn't form how we're going to act, the actions that we do, and the way that we perceive the world. And so I know it's the more tricky question to parse, and sometimes it doesn't seem sometimes like there is a right answer, but we've heard it before a lot. Do you believe that you can legislate morality?
No, I don't think you can legislate morality. People are either good or they're not. There is evil in this world. God put us in a position where we have a choice, a free will, and there are truly evil people in this world. But I think most people try to be good as much as they can. And I think that it's not that hard to do the right thing. I think that for me in my lifetime, I'm not a perfect person. We all make mistakes, and hopefully you learn from those mistakes and move on. But if you think about what the job of a congressman in Washington, it's to look at legislation or to create legislation and say, is this inherently good for the majority of the people in this country? They say in politics, you never get 100% of what you want. It's part compromise. Okay, so you might not get 100% of what you want, but at the same time, if I were asked to vote on a bill that it goes against my morals, or it's unethical or something like that, I don't care how much good they try to pack in there. If there's that 5% that's really bad, my answer, Tyler, is going to be no, no, no every single time if they try to slip one past me there.
Okay. And similar to kind of that telling part, and one area I know that Idahoans, both me and you know very well with the Idaho legislators this last session and just nationally, it's become more and more important, is education. What do you think the federal government's involvement should be in the form of education at the local levels? Should it be where it is right now? Should it be curtailed, or should it be maybe a hybrid where it's gone just a little too far and it needs a correction? What do you think that balance of education within Idaho and the federal government looks like?
I don't think the federal government should have a role in the state of Idaho's education system at all. In fact, I would like to do away with the federal role entirely when it comes to educating children. When you introduce like school choice is a big hot topic all over the country. And I look at it like this: whenever you introduce competition into a system, there are two outcomes every single time. It's almost like a law of physics. When you increase competition, you get better outcomes and you get lower cost. And that is true whether it's the financial world, the business world, or the education system. And I'd like to see that happen in the state of Idaho, where you do have true school choice and taxpayer dollars can follow the student to the best place that they want to get their education, whether that's the homeschool crowd, uh, Christian-based school systems, and make the public school system compete. Right now, they have a
Right.
monopoly. They don't really have to truly compete, and that's why they're bloated. More than half of the state budget goes strictly to our education system, which I think is way, way too much. And it would be different if they were cranking out, a bunch of Mensa scholars, right? They're not. The test scores in Idaho
Right.
keep going down. We keep throwing money at the problem. More money, less results. I think we need to fix that system and fix it if we're going to be successful as a state.
Would you be saying that the way to fix or the issue that occurs with the public school system isn't that there's not good people in it, but that the problem is that there's a lack of competition to actually make them competent, to actually make them competitive, to actually produce seems like the wrong word, but to actually produce a well-rounded, competent student? Would that be the way you're kind of going at that?
Yeah, that's a pretty accurate assessment. And I think people were maybe a little bit oblivious to the deficiencies of our current school system until COVID came around. And when kids were forced to go take their lessons on a computer from home, and mom and dad were hovering over their shoulder watching what's going on in our school systems, I think a lot of parents for the first time ever said, wait a doggone minute, how did we get here? What is this that's going on?
Right.
And I think that you see like the pornography that was found in our libraries, public and school libraries. I think that was a big issue that came from it. And if there is a silver lining, one of the silver linings from COVID is parents were made aware of what is truly going on in the public school systems across this country and have gotten super involved in it. I think that's a good thing.
Agreed. Agreed. I mean, at any level, I think as we're slowly talking about this, you would agree that be it in your local politics or in the education, that's something we stress here on the show at Local Yokel, is to be involved. I know it can seem like a lot, but if everyone just put a little bit of time and effort, it can make a huge, huge difference.
Yeah, one of my favorite sayings is all politics are local. So traveling the state like I have, I hear a lot of people complain about the problems that are facing our country and our state. And my question to them is, okay, well, you can sit around and complain, or you can get involved. Maybe they should become a precinct committee person or uh, attend a school board meeting or two. There's lots of ways to get involved right in your own community. And I love it when people do that and get excited about fixing the problems instead of just complaining. Doesn't take any talent to complain.
No, no, it doesn't. Everyone can be an armchair complainer. And maybe the
Right.
last question there on education. It seems like you have two camps. You've got one group that
Sure.
sits there and says, education shouldn't teach you how to think. It should just give you the information and you make your own decision, right? You should just be informed, right? And then the other camp says, no, you don't just give information. No, you teach a person how to think. Where would you say you land on that position in the direction that education should go?
I'll give you one of my favorite John Wayne quotes since we're having a good time here tonight. John Wayne once said, life is hard. It's even harder when you're stupid. So, life has a way of teaching you lessons. Don't do this, or here's the consequence. Don't do that, or here's the consequence. And I think that if you don't learn from your mistakes and correct your behavior, you won't be around for very long as a productive member of society. You won't have a good job. You won't have much of a future if you keep doing what's the saying? Play stupid games, win stupid prizes, or something. You young guys have that. I
Yes.
don't know what that is.
But like you said, there's consequences for those actions. And something that I know kind of coming from the local and going more to the national seems to be immune to consequences sometimes is stuff with the economy on a national level. How would you try to tackle that issue of where it seems like for good reasons, Americans like cheaper goods, right? If you move it overseas, then the labor's cheaper. You can bring it in, right? I mean, you understand the economics to a certain degree where for a businessman, it makes sense why to do that. But how would you both for the benefit of the businessman and for on an economic give those incentives to bring maybe that manufacturing back? How would you help that economy, especially nationally and specifically here in Idaho?
Well, there's a couple things that come to mind when it comes to solving a lot of America's problems can be solved if you have a good, robust, healthy economy from top to bottom. And we had a pretty good, robust economy 4 years ago, and now we have Biden and company in there telling us what kind of light bulbs to buy, telling us what kind of cars to buy, pushing the whole green energy nonsense on us. And those are just bad economic policies. The good news is those aren't permanent. Those are reversible if you get somebody in office that sets better policy. So one of the keys, though, to having a robust economy, of course, is closing the border. You cannot continue to have this country invaded by people that are largely coming here to suck off of the taxpayers. They're not coming here to be producing members of society. Now, there was a time when they used to, maybe 30 or 40 years ago, but nowadays there's a bunch of leeches coming in across the border, and that's a net negative for the rest of the citizenry. So I object to that. We need to close the border immediately. Another self-inflicted problem, though, has to do with our energy policy. Just 4 years ago, we were paying half as much for a gallon of gasoline as we are today. I'm paying over $4 a gallon now. I was paying $2 a gallon. But that is a bad decision on the Biden's part. I mean, for the first time in U.S. history, we were a net exporter of oil and natural gas to countries outside the U.S. That was our excess. We weren't selling what we needed. We were selling, because we had excess. Well, those resources haven't evaporated. They haven't gone away. It's just the Biden administration deliberately doesn't want to drill for those resources. They want to force the green energy crowd's agenda on us, which is nothing more than a taxpayer-funded money laundering operation to special interest groups. And I object to that. But it is reversible. We get Trump back in the White House. We'll open up drilling and exploration a little bit. You'll see gas prices come back down. And the cost of a gallon of gas or diesel is baked into every good or service that you purchase. And so having bad energy policy has been an additional factor in fueling the crushing inflation that we're all experiencing. And good news, though, it's reversible. It's going to take a while.
Thankfully, that's the nice thing. There is hope. It's good to look on the positive. I know sometimes we can be hardwired to kind of see it that way, but that all of that economy obviously is held up or runs off of, like, if you had to imagine a platform, right? From my understanding, is a currency, right? There's a currency that keeps that economy going. It's the medium which an economy runs upon. How would you hopefully solve that issue with inflation to make the US dollar more stable once again?
Well, that has to do with the government printing more money than it takes in. And people like to make inflation this real complicated subject. I like to break it down into the simplest of terms, and it goes something like this. When the federal government is printing money just because they can, out of thin air, if you will, when they print more money, the money that's in your wallet or purse immediately becomes worth less just because there's more of it. It's not a rare commodity anymore when they just keep printing more money. So
right.
The never-ending reckless spending of our federal government and the printing of money, if we can reverse course on that, get a balanced budget amendment and bring it back down the other side of the hill, sadly, it's going to take us about 10 years to get our financial house in order. We cannot just continue deficit spending. When my opponent, Mike Simpson, took office, our debt was a mere $5 trillion with a T. Today, it's just under 35 trillion with a T, and the interest on that is almost $1 billion. And that is not sustainable. We have to turn that thing around, but it's going to take some strong leaders in Washington, and we don't have strong leaders in Washington right now. They just keep spending money and printing money because they're going to be dead or retired when these chickens come home to roost. And guys your age are going to be footing the bill for all of that excessive spending. It's not fair. It's an issue of fairness, if nothing else.
Right. That someone might think, well, consequences, what are you talking about? We move some money here, we re-level this, it's all fine, it's a write-off, So yeah, we spend a lot of money, but like you even reiterated earlier before, are we really spending it on things that are worthwhile? And on that, as you said, with power and infrastructure, spending money on things, this one shocks me. I remember reading your op-ed on it, and it's something that has made me personally a little bit frustrated with Mike Simpson. The amount of time and money he spent and working with the Biden administration on the Snake River dams that they're trying to get removed. What
Right.
what would be your course of action to prevent such events occurring? And for those that might not know, why are those dams so important to Idaho?
Well, first off, the proposal is being led by our own Mike Simpson. He's not a backbencher. He's not a passenger in this bus. He is leading the charge in Washington, D.C., and he has been for over 3 years to remove 4 hydroelectric dams on the lower Snake River. And those dams are not in Idaho, but the impact of their removal is a disastrous economic decision for the entire region. Our other three members of Congress don't want the dams to come out. The governor doesn't want the dams to come out. If you're in the ag business, you don't want the dams to come out. And if you pay an electric bill, you certainly don't want the dams to come out either. So that is a horrible economic decision. And we cannot afford to take that chance that Mike Simpson is successful in doing that. 65% of the region's electricity come from just those 4 dams. 65%.
Yeah, it is a ton of energy we get there. And the thing, especially you as an investor probably know, we've paid them off multiple times with the amount of
Right.
energy and the amount of effort we put into them. Why would we then turn around and get rid of them and build other infrastructure that requires new investment, new money, and more waiting for a return on investment rather than hydro? It just keeps working. It's very reliable, and we paid it off.
Well, I saw a study that said just to replace that amount of energy that comes out of those 4 dams, you'd have to build 2 nuclear plants or 3 coal-fired plants or 6 natural gas plants. Can you imagine the cost of doing any of that? And that's just to break even. That's how bad the
Right.
energy policy is. The other part of it has to do with the ag industry. So all over Idaho, both North Idaho and the Snake River Valley, ag is our number one industry by far. Well, much of the commodities that are grown in both of those regions are put on 18 wheelers and they're trucked to the port at Lewiston, the furthest inland port in America.
Yep.
If those dams come out, the port at Lewiston goes out of business, and all of those commodities now have to be trucked all the way downriver to the West Coast at a much greater cost than shipping it by barge. In fact, one barge on the Columbia River holds 140 18-wheel trucks. It's highly efficient. Well, those costs won't be borne by the companies. They're not going to eat those trucking costs, those shipping costs. They're going to increase the price of goods and services. And there we go, more inflation coming your way. So it's a disastrous policy. And yet he insists on it in the name of salmon reparations, right? It's supposed to be about saving the salmons. There are many reasons why the salmon populations fluctuate year over year, and the dams are just one small part of the equation. There's a lot more to it.
And also, I mean, you would probably agree with me on this, but we as Christians see in God's word that God gave his creations and he asked us to be good stewards of it, right? We're not to sit there and abuse it.
Right.
If your father gives you a really nice car, right, you're not going to wrap it around a telephone pole. You're going to take good care of it. But vice versa, that car, or in this case, creation, God gave us to enjoy, to be fruitful, multiply upon it, and to subdue it. And when we put the needs of creation in front of our own, that's when problems can sometimes happen. Not to say we should be insensitive to things like salmon. And if there legitimately is an issue, I think you would agree trying to do things to solve it. But I think the most drastic thing would be removing those dams.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And since we were talking about biblical principles, let's not forget that God gave man dominion over animals. So the rights of these salmon doesn't supersede the demand for energy of human beings in this area. So I'm a fisherman. I love fish. I like to fish. Nothing against the salmon, but at the same
Right.
time, you got to use common sense. We're not going to rip out those highly efficient hydroelectric dams just to increase fish populations on the chance that that might do it. There are a lot of different ways to increase the fish populations without ripping out those dams. And it's just bad policy all the way around.
I haven't heard Mike Simpson's counter response yet. Granted, I don't know what it could be, but transitioning also to something that we as Americans and especially Idahoans love a lot is firearms. One of those God-given things, the right for protection, and our Constitution kind of gives us that. What would you try to do at the federal level to kind of, I think it's the ATF, yeah, the ATF to kind of bring them in to more of an alignment so that they're not overreaching and things like that for Idaho?
Well, sadly, Tyler, I don't think that you're going to see a slowdown or a stoppage from the three-letter agencies and the gun grabbing crowd trying to restrict the rights of law-abiding citizens. Most of the crime that they talk about these days is mass school shootings, mass shootings, and they go on and on about that, and they're trying to leverage those issues in the names of, they use terms like sensible gun control and responsible gun ownership. Well, the people that are creating the problems in this country are not responsible gun owners. We clearly have a mental health crisis. I think some of the resources should be directed that way. And I object to all of these gun grabbing measures like red flag laws and so on. No, let's face it, nobody wants to see a school get shot up, right? We can start there. Nobody wants to see a school or a church get shot up or anywhere else. But these people, that's not their intention. Their intention is to restrict the rights and liberties and freedoms of self-protecting people. People, again, this goes back to the founding of our country. The Second Amendment is not, that principle is based on the right, the God-given right for you to protect your person. Happens to be with a firearm. The government codified that and put it in the form of the Bill of Rights under the Second Amendment, but it's a hard stop. It says the right to protect yourself and to bear arms shall not be infringed. Hard stop. You can't start adding things to the back end of it. The only thing that's saving us from a tyrannical federal government today, I'm sad to say it, but the only thing that's saving America from the same brutal treatment that you see in foreign countries is the fact that Americans do enjoy the Second Amendment. They're not willing to give up their guns or their rights, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. And I think it's one of the most critical factors in the Bill of Rights, and we need to keep it and keep the feds from chipping away at those rights.
I totally agree with you there on the firearm issue, that I would say it's a gradient that we have where people should be involved in local politics. They should be keeping their politicians accountable. And the ultimate, sadly, we hope that no one has to go to that, but our founding fathers were smart and said, no, we're going to give you the big red button, right? The ultimate responsibility, or the ultimate way to keep our elected representatives accountable, is that show of force, is firearms. And America does that even on a national scale. Internationally, we understand this law of reasoning that we say, carry a big stick, speak softly. Not a Republican, but still a good piece of wisdom.
Yeah, I agree with that. We have to have a strong military of the places where we need to cut back, wasteful federal spending. I would take the scissors, the pruning scissors, if you will, to our entitlement programs and not our national defense. Our national defense is not what it should be. We have a lot of enemies that want to do harm to us. That threat is not going down, it's going up. And so, yeah, we need to cut a lot of other programs, but national defense is not one of them, in my mind, in my opinion.
And I know one thing that we're having to defend, and kind of the last question before we wrap it up here, is the border. You've already kind of touched on it a little bit there. How far, because I can tell that you would want to have the border closed, but how hard would you be pushing there in Congress to try to get the border closed?
I think that would be my number one priority the minute I hit Washington, D.C., because the people that are coming across the border today are being shipped to all 50 states. That's a national security issue of the highest level. We're going to have to vet some of these people, and the people that are not here to have gainful employment and are going to follow our laws, the people that broke the law to be here in the first place, they don't get to jump the line ahead of the legal immigrants that come into this country each year, which is currently about 1.1 million people. We have a legal system to come here. These people are circumventing that at the behest of the Biden administration. So all of those people have to be dealt with in some way. I say we send them back to where they came from. I'm not saying they don't have the right to apply for citizenship or legal entry, but they got to get the back of the line ahead of people that are doing it properly. So border security, you don't even need to get into the fentanyl trafficking, the sex trafficking, the fact that only 45% of the people coming into our country today, only 45% are from Latin America countries. They're coming from all over the world, including the Middle East, a haven for terrorists, known terrorists. So I'm really worried for our country. If we don't fix that border, I don't think our country would survive another 4 years of Joe Biden letting just unvetted whoever wants to come in, come in. I think we're headed for real trouble if we don't get Joe Biden out of office.
And I know I think it's a very realistic objection, and I've heard it said is, say Republicans get their laundry list right now, you get your wish, you get you get your 3 wishes, and one of those is to close the border, right?
Right.
I've heard people counter that, okay, cool, close the border, whatever, right? You do that. But you keep pointing to this legal system of people trying to get in. But this legal system, would you do certain things to try to expand it or help it to be more efficient? What things would you try to do to try to make that line more efficient so it can handle that influx?
A couple of things about what I would do to increase the functionality of the legal immigration system. Again, that's a place where if the system is too slow, then let's increase the number of employees that work for those departments so we can process more people legally. I'm not opposed to increasing the labor force if it makes good sense to do that. I also think that we could probably handle a slightly higher total number of legal immigrants coming into the country. Right now, there's 333 million people in the U.S. So 1% of that is about 3.3 million people. I think a country our size with the economy that we have, I think we could afford to absorb about a 1% increase in population from outside every single year. I don't see that being a problem. Again, that's only if you're willing to close the border from the illegals that are coming in.
Right.
And we just, everybody goes through the front door, the gate. They don't go around. They don't go over the fence, under the fence. They go through that legal system. If they're truly refugees, political refugees, then they should have no problem waiting their turn in line. So those are the answers for, things that I think would help the border. We can't leave it the way it is.
No, I don't think it's an issue either on a Republican or on a liberal standpoint that needs that can be left alone. Either it needs to be right out in the open address that no, we're closing the border, or no, we don't have any borders anymore. Literally, let's just actually be honest about it and the way that we're handling that. I mean, as we've gone through this whole interview, we've talked about both the the sad parts of our country and also the great parts and come up with solutions and stuff. But like anything, if you're going to try to build a house right, you need a vision for what that house is going to be, an end goal for the end product to kind of bring it all into fruition. And it might not be 100% that, but you at least have a vision, an idea at the end. What for Idaho would be your vision, and then nationally would be your vision, or that you would hope would be your legacy if you ended up getting into office?
Well, we're very fortunate to live in Idaho in the first place, and that's why the demand and the influx of outsiders coming from all across the country to want to live here. You can't blame them for wanting to live in a beautiful state like Idaho that has natural resources, a good, pretty good economy, and so on. So I'm not one of these, let's keep everybody out, we're closed. Most of the people that move here from outside are conservative. Not all of them, but the vast majority are conservative. I see that as a bonus. The second thing about the newcomers is they're not broke. They sell a house in California for $2 million, and they come here, they're not broke. And so they've greatly added to our local economy. Yes, I know traffic on Eagle Road is a real pain in the rear end, but we'll have to just deal with it as best we can. But on a national level, I look at America as a giant, beautiful old Victorian mansion of a home, and it's not a tear down. It just needs a serious refurbishing, if you will. The plumbing, the electricity, a little paint here and there, it'll stand another 100 years if we take care of it. And I look at that's how America is. It's still a great place, but it's in need of some repairs, much needed repairs.
Well, I would agree. Yes. I mean, that's the platform that Trump is running on, Make America Great Again. Or I can't remember. Is it there's Make America Great Again, but then I could have sworn either it was him or someone else was giving the phrase like Keep America Great.
I think primarily he's running on Make America Great Again. I mean, that's kind of his main slogan. And while it's a cute, catchy slogan, the underlying part of that makes sense and is resonating with voters in this country is America first. You know, Trump is just a man. I do support President Trump, but the underlying issue there is not one of nationalism, but it is one of let's take care of Americans here at home first. And if we're in a position to help foreigners, if we're in a position to help people outside of this country, we've always done that. But right now we have it backwards, and their needs are being prioritized over Americans here. And I think most people recognize that, and they object to it. So I think you're going to see big changes this November, and hopefully in a couple of weeks in the primary. The establishment, the status quo, we can't keep doing what we're doing. And I think a lot of these people are going to be voted out of office. That's my hope anyways.
I was just about to say, kind of landing the plane for the whole interview here, but you almost did it. You almost did a 3-point landing there. But is there anything you want to plug, closing statement, all of that as we kind of wrap it up here?
No, if people want to learn more about our campaign, they can certainly visit the website. That's easy to find, clevelandforcongress.org. It's got quite a bit of, my endorsements on there. There's video clips. There's resources links to other interviews that I've done over time. You can volunteer with the campaign, but you better hurry. You can donate money, but you better hurry if you're going to do that. And lastly, Tyler, I just want to thank you and congratulate you for your efforts to bring more young people into politics. They say you might not be interested in politics, but politics is interested in you. And I think the younger that somebody learns that life lesson, the better off they're going to be down the road. So thank you for having me on the show.
Thank you so much for coming on, sir.
Thank you very much. Again, Scott Cleveland, your next United States member of the House of Representatives in Congressional District 2. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the interview. I hope everyone found this enlightening and you learned more than what you would have known otherwise about Scott Cleveland and the race for the 2nd Congressional District for U.S. House of Representatives. If there's someone you want me to interview or someone that you think would love to come on, please reach out to me on Twitter or email me at the podcast email there. I'd love to have people on to share their viewpoints and perspectives about the amazing state here that we call Idaho. That's all for now. I wish you a fantastic rest of your week. Godspeed.